In 1945, Japan's chief of military intelligence made a confession that should have been impossible. His codebreakers were among the best on Earth. They had cracked the codes of the United States Army. They had cracked the codes of the Army Air Corps. But one code, a code carried not in machines, but inside the minds of a few hundred young men, defeated the entire Japanese empire for the length of the Pacific War. They intercepted it. They recorded it. They even captured a native speaker of the language and made him listen, and they still could not read one single message. Roughly 400 men, one code, 0 leaks, 0 breaks. From Guadalcanal in 1942 to the surrender in 1945. It remains the only code in modern military history that was never broken. And the men who built it were forbidden to tell anyone, even their own mothers, for 23 years. This is the documented story of the Navajo Code Talkers, and it begins, strangely enough, with a newspaper article. Before we start, here is your question for the comments. What do you think is the strongest vault in the world, a machine or a human memory? Answer now, then see if you still agree at the end. To understand why this code worked, you first have to understand a painful irony, one that regular viewers of this channel will recognize by now. In the early 20th century, Navajo children across Arizona and New Mexico were sent to government boarding schools, and in those schools, speaking Navajo was forbidden. Children were punished for using the language of their grandparents. The official plan was for Navajo to fade away within a generation or two. Chester Nez, a man you will meet again at the very end of this story, was one of those children. Now hold that image, a boy being punished for speaking Navajo, because in about 10 years, the United States Marine Corps is going to come looking for that exact language and beg for it. Here is the twist that starts the whole machine. The idea did not come from a general or a cryptographer or a war room. It came from a civil engineer in Los Angeles named Philip Johnston, the son of a missionary raised on the Navajo reservation, one of the very few outsiders on Earth who...
What those 29 men created was far more clever than just speaking Navajo over the radio. And this is the detail that decides the entire war of codes. They built 2 layers. Layer 1, a coded vocabulary. Military terms became Navajo words for things from home. Fighter planes became hummingbirds. Dive bombers became chicken hawks. Submarines became iron fish. Tanks became turtles. A battleship became a whale. The war in the Pacific, as heard on a Navajo net, sounds like the strangest nature documentary ever recorded. Layer 2, an alphabet. For names and places, each English letter was represented by Navajo words. The word for ant could mean the letter A, bear meant B, cat meant C, and most letters had multiple interchangeable words, so patterns never repeated. The starting code was 211 terms. By the end of the war, it had grown to over 400, and every single term had to be memorized. Nothing written could go into combat. Marines who grew up in the oral traditions of the Navajo Nation, memorizing songs, stories, ceremonies, later said that training was the one part that felt familiar. The Marine Corps had accidentally recruited the 400 best memories in America. Now, here is the proof of how deep that second layer went, and it is one of the most astonishing verified facts of the Pacific War. The Japanese captured a Navajo soldier, a man from the army taken prisoner in the Philippines. When Japanese intelligence realized the strange transmissions were Navajo, they forced him to listen. A native speaker, fluent from birth, he heard the words perfectly: ant, bear, sheep, turtle, iron fish, and understood nothing. Because without the memorized code layer, it was gibberish even in his own language. After the war, he reportedly told a code talker, "I never could figure out what you were saying." The Japanese had done everything right. They found the language, they found a speaker, and the vault still would not open. Quick pause here. If you have been watching this channel, you have met the Comanche Code Talkers of D-Gay and the ghost of Anzio, Tommy Prince. This is the third pillar of that story, and if this is your first video here, subscribe, because this channel is building the full record of these men, one documented story at a time. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from. First combat test? Guadalcanal, late 1942, and the debut came with a moment of pure chaos that veterans loved retelling. When the first Navajo transmissions went out over the nets, American radio operators who had not been briefed panicked. They thought the Japanese had seized their frequency. Signal officers had to be convinced that the strange language flooding the airwaves was on their side. It did not take long to convince them. Messages that once crawled now flew. Artillery corrections, troop movements, casualty reports, encoded, sent, and decoded in seconds, with the enemy listening to every word and reading none of it. From that point on, the Navajo Code Talkers were in every single assault the Marines made in the Pacific: Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, Peleliu, Iwo Jima, all 6 Marine divisions, the Raider battalions, the parachute units. Wherever the Marines landed, Navajo went ashore in the first waves. But the front lines carried a danger for these men that no other Marine faced. To some of their own comrades, in the smoke and terror of a beachhead, the Navajo Code Talkers' features looked Japanese.
Which brings us to the mountain. February 1945, Iwo Jima. 8 square miles of black volcanic ash, honeycombed with Japanese tunnels, defended by more than 20,000 soldiers ordered to fight to the death. The Marines' entire landing had to be coordinated in real time, under fire, on open radio nets the Japanese were absolutely monitoring. The 5th Marine Division's signal officer, Major Howard Connor, made his choice. The operation would run on Navajo. He had 6 code talkers, 6, working around the clock through the first 2 days of the landing. In those first 48 hours, they sent and received more than 800 messages, 800 plus, under bombardment, no notes, no books, memory alone. Number of errors, 0. And when the fighting finally clawed to the top of Mount Suribachi and the flag went up in the most famous photograph of the war, accounts describe that news racing across the nets in code, Navajo voices carrying the moment from the mountain to the fleet. Major Connor's verdict is quoted in official Navy history, word for word. Were it not for the Navajos, the Marines would never have taken Iwo Jima. The victory had its price. 13 code talkers were killed in action in the Pacific, 13 men who died protecting a country that was still deciding state by state whether their people could vote. And when Japan surrendered in 1945 and the transmissions finally went quiet, Japan's intelligence chief, Lieutenant General Seizo Arisude, admitted the truth we opened with. They had broken the Army's codes, but the code the Marines used, never. Roughly 400 men had carried an entire theater's secrets between their ears, and not one message ever leaked. And now, the part of this story that this channel exists to tell. The war ended, the parades began, and the code talkers were pulled aside and given one final order: say nothing. The code had worked too well to give away. It might be needed again, so the program stayed top secret. Code talker Peter McDonald remembered the instruction exactly. If anyone asks what you did in the war, say, "I was a radio man. That's all, nothing more." So they went home to the reservation, to families who asked what they had done, and they said, "Radio man." No medals for the code, no headlines. Some came home to places where they still could not vote. It took until 1962 before Native Americans could vote in every state in the Union. The men who ran the most secure communications network of the Second World War waited in silence for 23 years. The silence broke in 1968, not out of gratitude, but obsolescence. New machine encryption had finally surpassed the code, so it was declassified, and recognition began arriving the way it always seems to in these stories,
slowly and late. A letter of appreciation from President Nixon in 1971, a place at the front of the Bicentennial Parade in 1976. In 1982, President Reagan proclaimed August 14 as National Navajo Code Talkers Day. And then in July 2001, 56 years after the last message, the original 29 were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal, the highest honor Congress can bestow, with silver medals for the hundreds who followed them. President Bush said it plainly at the ceremony. This is a story of an ancient people called to serve in a modern war, and above all, a story of young Navajos who brought honor to their nation and victory to their country. By that day, most of the 400 were already gone. Of the original 29, only a handful were still alive to feel the gold in their hands. The last of those first 29 was Chester Nez, the same Chester Nez who had been punished as a boy for speaking Navajo. Before he passed away in 2014, he explained what had carried him through the Pacific, and his words are the heart of this entire story. I reminded myself that my Navajo people had always been warriors, protectors. In that, there was honor. I would concentrate on being a warrior and protecting my homeland, not revenge, not glory, protection of a homeland that had not yet protected him back. So return one last time to that Japanese intelligence chief in 1945, signing off on his confession, every American code broken except one. His experts had assumed the unbreakable code would be a machine, something with rotors and wiring, something engineering could eventually defeat. They never imagined the truth. The unbreakable code was a language that children had been beaten for speaking, carried in the memories of the very people that policy had tried to silence. 400 quiet men who answered erasure with service. Machines get captured, machines get reverse-engineered, but a code woven from an ancient language and 400 loyal memories was beyond the reach of an empire. They tried to erase the language. The language saved the Pacific. 0 leaks, 0 breaks, and for 23 years, when anyone asked, just a radio man. Now you know better, and now so will everyone you share this with.